Peter B. Collins.
Peter B. Collins, news and comment. It's Thursday, April 12th, 2018. Trump's got his finger on the trigger. It's getting really itchy. He's eager to launch a military assault on Syria. And it appears the only rational guy in the room is the one whose nickname is Mad Dog. And that would be James Mattis, a military general currently running the Pentagon in the Trump administration. He's survived 4 days without being pushed out by John Bolton, the new hothead national security advisor, and we'll see how long he lasts. As I speak, it's about 2 o'clock Pacific time, and as I understand it, there is a National Security Council meeting underway at the White House to discuss the options related to Syria. And what is remarkable about Mad Dog Mattis is that he is acknowledging that we do not yet have absolute proof of Syrian responsibility for the alleged chemical release in the community of Douma, the northeast suburbs of Damascus, last Saturday. And I hasten to add that while I am skeptical that Syria was responsible for this alleged use of a chemical weapon, even if it is proven true, the idea that we can go in and kill more Syrians and that is going to cause Bashar al-Assad to rethink his brutal tactics, and with or without chemical weapons, Assad has presided over a brutal civil war. Now, it's been compounded by the entry of all the proxy forces supported by the U.S., by Turkey, by Saudi Arabia, by elements of the Emirates. And as we have described in colorful language before, it has been a massive clusterfuck. But the bottom line for me is that slinging more American missiles and bombs into Syria is not going to really change the character or the behavior of Bashar al-Assad. Now, that aside, I am still awaiting proof of Syrian responsibility for what happened, and we still have no verification of the videos and the other reports that have come out of Douma in the past week. Now, Trump is toying with us and with those on the receiving end of a presumed imminent American attack. He tweeted this morning, never said when an attack on Syria would take place. Could be very soon, or not so soon at all. In any event, the United States under my administration has done a great job of ridding the region of ISIS. Where is our thank you, America? Now, Trump claimed he had a secret plan to eradicate ISIS. We never heard boo about it since he took control at the White House. And while the Islamic State is largely dissipated, it's not completely eradicated, and the idea that it was U.S. military action that devastated the Islamic State is far from the truth. It really has been Russian intervention on behalf of the Damascus government that has turned the tide. And now we have a side war with Turkey fighting the Kurds on the northern border of Syria. And the cluster remains pretty effed up. Now we have Emmanuel Macron, the president of France, who says we have proof that last week, 10 days ago even, chemical weapons were used, at least chlorine, and that they were used by the regime of Bashar al-Assad. Now, that comment is all over the place. Now, the incident in question is less than a week ago. It was last Saturday. But he's saying we have proof that last week, 10 days ago even, chemical weapons were used, at least chlorine. Now, we have conflicting accounts about whether this was simply the release of chlorine as a liquid, or if it was gasified, or if the chlorine was a component in a nerve agent like sarin. And I think that those distinctions do make a difference. We are learning that Germany is opting out of this little military festival. Angela Merkel, the chancellor, said it won't be part of any coordinated military action in Syria, and Germany also opted out of the takedown of Gaddafi in Libya and our lovely invasion of Iraq back in 2003. The Germans have restraint in cases where the United States should have. So Mattis also said in comments on Capitol Hill that he is concerned about any retaliatory strike and how to keep it from escalating out of control. This is a serious issue because Russia has said it will shoot down our incoming missiles or bomber jets, fighter jets, that enter disputed Syrian airspace. So this is a very messy situation. It is compounded by Trump's contradictory tweets. And he ought to just put that damn phone down. Just before we get to his tweets, I want to mention that I watched an interview on BBC with Peter Ford, the former British ambassador to Syria, and he flatly says there was no chemical attack, that this is a contrived event. He didn't cite the predictions that Russia made on March 19th and 20th, but I will. And that makes this a very unusual case that deserves full investigation before we launch some sort of military action that could escalate into a very serious world war. But of course, Trump is so full of himself and he's totally insecure, but he overcompensates with this massive bully persona. And when he projects it on behalf of the United States, it simply makes me cringe. So, to the tweets. He promised never to telegraph military action against an enemy, but the last few days he has been bragging about a coming missile strike on Syria, until the counter tweet that he issued this morning. He threatened Russia, called its relations with the U.S. worse than during the Cold War, but he blamed that ill will not on Moscow, but on Bob Mueller and the special counsel investigation. He praised President Xi Jinping of China for his enlightenment on trade, but in the speech that Trump was praising, Xi actually offered little to change what Trump has called decades of predatory practices by Beijing. And he really is his own worst enemy in many of these situations. And sure, he believes that he's unpredictable and that this is, what throws off his adversaries because they just don't know what he's going to do. But it really comes across as a massive weakness. He can't see that. But the same adversaries that he thinks he's keeping off base, off balance, they're the ones who can see right through it. And I want to take a moment here to read an extraordinary statement that showed up on my Facebook feed this morning. Manar Mahawish is a very bright woman. She started the news website Mint Press News, and she is a proud Muslim woman. And I want you to put in your sarcasm filter software as I read this, because it is completely sarcastic. She writes, "It is so incredibly beautiful to see so many of my Muslim friends and community stand so united, as if in unison, in support of the United States' war against Syria and Russia. I couldn't think of a better cause for Muslims to actually agree on in supporting Trump. It's even more inspiring to see our Muslim establishment organizations like CAIR Care and leaders devoting their time and effort to applauding and cheering Trump, calling him a real man after they once referred to him as a sexual predator and an incompetent real estate mogul." Her sarcasm drips further. "My heart is so warm that it's melting watching Muslims across the U.S. calling for the bombing of Assad, because when those bombs are dropped on Syria, it's not the millions of children, women, men, and all the young aspiring doctors and engineers who will be murdered by the thousands of U.S., British, French, Israeli, Saudi bombs raining down on Syria. No, it will just be Assad and his military." Oh, and she continues. She's not done. "I am so proud of our Muslim community for being able to put all of their differences aside to stand in the cause of killing innocent children. I am so proud of our Muslim community for being duped time and time again by media and war propaganda, who have engineered a humanitarian crisis as they did in Iraq, Libya, and Afghanistan to justify military intervention in a time when war is the most profitable business. I am so proud of our Muslim community who are now standing in unison and repeating the same tunes of the very war hawks who actively sponsor and arm apartheid, occupation, colonialism, and even genocide against Palestinians in Gaza. I am so proud of our Muslim community for standing strong with the war establishment as they support a total genocide of people in Yemen. I am so proud of our Muslim community for saying that Trump is so much stronger than Obama, for wanting to bomb Syria as he and Obama sponsored the starvation and malnutrition of the children in Yemen, Somalia, Sudan, and countless other countries. This is truly a proud moment for us Muslims to reflect on, because that is what Islam teaches us, to apparently support war, genocide, colonialism, and profits for major corporations, and to never question the tyrants that rule over us. Without even realizing it, we have now fit into the mold of what the establishment has crafted about Muslims, that we support killing. Let's give ourselves a big pat on the back. All right, the sarcasm portion of our program has concluded. Also, just a little more confusion and misdirection from Trump. He told a gathering of farm state lawmakers and governors today that he is directing his advisors to look into rejoining the Trans-Pacific Partnership. How about that? Now, let me be fair here, because one of the few positions that Trump took that I agreed with during the campaign back in 2016 was opposition to the TPP. Now, he didn't oppose it for the same reasons I did, but Hillary Clinton had to be dragged along into shifting into opposition of TPP after she had helped start the process while she was Secretary of State. And Bernie Sanders was against TPP, but he never really articulated, I think, the right reasons. The real problems with the Trans-Pacific Partnership were the way it was being negotiated in secret, and that it was much more than a trade deal. It would have redefined and imposed lower standards in the United States for labor, the environment, and many other critical issues. There were some 28 chapters of the Trans-Pacific Partnership, and only 5 of them really related to trade. So I do not oppose this, as long as it's done in the open, because I think that we do need to have a clear strategy about trade with difficult nations like Japan and China that don't reciprocate. So we'll see where this goes, but it's part of the incoherent tariff scheme and punish China messages that he's been pumping out for a few weeks now, and so it is very hard to determine what he actually thinks. And of course, even if we do determine that, it can change really damn fast. So yesterday I talked about how the possibility existed that Democratic senators could join forces with Rand Paul and block the confirmation of Mike Pompeo as Secretary of State and Gina Haspel as Director of the CIA by standing together in the committee. And then they would have the vote they need from Rand Paul to overcome the narrow majority that the Republicans have. But based on the first round of hearings today in the Senate, it doesn't appear that Mike Pompeo is going to face a difficult confirmation process. In the Senate Foreign Relations Committee, he was asked really tough questions like the guy who just escaped jail time, Bob Menendez, the Democrat of New Jersey, said, "Will you enable President Trump's worst instincts?" And Pompeo is a deft enough guy. He is, I think he's a Harvard-trained guy. He's very smart. The fact that he threw his lot in with the Koch brothers and is a knuckle-dragging conservative, doesn't minimize that he is a smart man. And so he kind of wove a fine line between Trump's madness and his own kiss-up-to-Trump posture that he has demonstrated as the director of the CIA. He said he would take a tough line against Russia, push to improve the Iran nuclear deal that Trump wants to scrap. But these, of course, are not commitments on his part. They're just observations. It's commentary. And so far, I see no indication that Democrats are really going to press Pompeo either over his role at the CIA or over his vision for the State Department should he be confirmed. The only real objection came from Medea Benjamin, Colonel Ann Wright, and other Code Pink protesters I saw them on Facebook video early this morning warming up some of their songs for the committee, and then I saw a post from Ann Wright that she had been arrested and released. So I will catch up on the rest of those proceedings later today, and if there's anything significant, I'll bring that along to you tomorrow. There is some controversy surfacing from Mike Pompeo's remarks. And Aaron Blake at the Washington Post notes that the aforementioned Senator Menendez queried Pompeo, and he asked him regarding a meeting it would have been last year's, before Comey was fired, when Dan Coats, the Director of National Intelligence, and Pompeo, then CIA Director, were instructed by Trump to remain behind as the others left a meeting. And we know that Trump asked Dan Coats to talk to Jim Comey and get the FBI to back off on the investigation of Mike Flynn, who was the national security advisor who Trump was forced to fire. So Menendez asked Pompeo whether Trump asked him to ask Comey to go easy on Flynn. And he gave three different answers. One, I'm not going to talk about the conversations with the president that I had. Two, I don't recall what he asked me that day precisely, which, of course, is talking about the conversation he had with the president. And then third, he said, he has never asked me to do anything that I consider remotely improper, which talking to Comey and asking him to go easy on Flynn would be. Now, these can't all be true. And based on what Dan Coats said, Mike Pompeo is dissembling. Is he directly lying? I can't quite say that. But he's being evasive. And it depends on the posture of senators whether they pick up on that and want to really drive it home and try to block his confirmation. The early signals are the Democrats will once again roll over. One of the things that I've been talking about recently is the silence here on these shores about the brutal sniper killings of protesting Palestinians in Gaza on the past 2 Fridays. And unfortunately, we can predict that it's likely to happen again tomorrow. There are only 5 Democrats who have spoken up, and they're not speaking out in blistering terms. But Bernie Sanders was the first. On March 31st, he tweeted, "The killing of Palestinian demonstrators by Israeli forces in Gaza is tragic. It is the right of all people to protest for a better future without a violent response." Now, he's saying it's tragic. He's not demonizing the Israelis. This is a very mild statement. But it stands out because it was the first and only one. And then when he appeared on CNN the following Sunday, Sanders, he expanded on the comment a little bit, or on the tweet. When asked if he accepts the Israeli government's explanation for the shootings, he says, "No, I don't." So I'll credit Sanders with having some level of courage and willing to speak up, even though it's not the strong language that I would use. Then we have Elizabeth Warren, who in the past has been silent on almost everything to do with Israel and the Palestinians, and in whatever comments she's made, she has echoed Israeli talking points. But Elizabeth Warren gave a statement. "I am deeply concerned about the deaths and injuries in Gaza. As additional protests are planned for the coming days, the Israel Defense Forces should exercise restraint and respect the rights of Palestinians to peacefully protest." Now, she's not issuing any blistering condemnation of Israel for these brutal sniper killings. But at least she's raising the issue. And according to The Intercept, they've reviewed the only other 3 members of Congress who have made any comment about Israeli conduct toward the protesters are Patrick Leahy, Senator of Vermont, Democrat, Congresswoman Betty McCollum, Democrat of Minnesota, and Congresswoman Barbara Lee, Democrat from Oakland, just across the bay from me here in California. And here's a profile in Courage. Doug Jones, the almost Democrat, now representing Alabama in the Senate. He said he's unaware of the killings. I probably need to do a little more looking at that because I'm just not as familiar with it. Well, what kind of bullshit? How can any elected official who gets briefings and just watches a little TV or reads the newspaper every day, how can you not know that Israel has killed 31 Palestinians over the last 2 Friday Gaza protests? And let's talk about who's not talking. Kamala Harris, Senator of California. Cory Booker, Senator from New Jersey. Kirsten Gillibrand, Senator from New York. They have refused to comment on the Palestinian deaths. Every day I pause for a second and thank the people who support my work here at the PBC podcast with your subscriptions. Let's see who's on the PayPal list today. Morgan Weiser just renewed an annual subscription. Morgan, thank you very much. Benny Alto has subscriptions at $5 a month for each of his pooches. One of them came up today. Thanks, Benny. Arlene Montemarano kicks in $10 a month. And Aidan McAleer is a longtime supporter of this podcast, too. I invite you to join them, and maybe this will produce a little response. I don't know. I never know what motivates people. But on the 21st of this month, I'm celebrating a big birthday. I turned 65. I'm now covered by Medicare. And I would really appreciate it if, I'm just going to pick a number here, 20 new monthly subscribers between now and the end of April. You can do it in honor of my birthday, and I'll give you a big shout-out on my birthday. Well, my birthday's on a Saturday. Somewhere close to it. All you got to do is drop by peterbcollins.com. There's a menu tab. Click on it. Pull it down, click on Become a Subscriber. You land on the sign-up page, and in a minute or two, you can pick a level of support that's comfortable for you. If you don't like PayPal, no problem, man. You can send me a cash check, money order, whatever you like. My mailing address is Box 150, 660, San Rafael, California, 94915. You got that? Box 150, 660, San Rafael, California, zip code 94915. Well, I remain skeptical about the claimed release of a nerve agent in Salisbury, England, over a month ago. We're told it was an intentional effort to assassinate the former double agent, Russian spy Sergei Skripal, and his daughter Yulia just happened to be visiting him. Well, now we are told by the International Organization for the Prohibition of Chemical Weapons that they have confirmed, that the agent that was used was a very pure form of Novichok. Now, I want you to understand that the OPCW issued a 2-page statement that doesn't use the word Novichok anywhere. It refers to it as a toxic chemical. Repeatedly, the results of analysis of biomedical samples conducted by OPCW-designated laboratories demonstrate the exposure of the 3 hospitalized individuals to this toxic chemical. The results of the environmental samples designated demonstrate the presence of this toxic chemical. And in the classified report that accompanied the 2-page publicity release, we are told that the chemical formula for Novichok is described. But the word Novichok is not used. Now, we have to trust them on that because we're not permitted to see this evidence. And this kind of infantilized approach, where we're just supposed to trust the British government, the American echoing of the claims of the British government, without evidence, without seeing either of the victims or getting comprehensive medical reports on them. And just listen to this language from The Guardian. Russia has vehemently denied involvement and waged a propaganda battle to try to discredit Britain's account of the attack. Now, Britain is scrambling to shore up its account of the attack, which has been hobbled by exaggerated statements, particularly from Boris Johnson, who is the Foreign Secretary of the United Kingdom. Even The Guardian acknowledges that the Kremlin's strategy has been to exploit weaknesses and inconsistencies in the UK's case. It seized on a blunder by Johnson, who wrongly claimed last week that the government science facility at Porton Down had attributed the nerve agent to Russia. In fact, that attribution was based on intelligence and analysis of previous Russian state hits. So that is the language it's consistent with. And this supports the exaggerated claims from Britain that no one else could have done it. But Craig Murray is the real truth teller here. I've linked to his latest post, and it is as amusing as it is informative. The headline reads, "Yulia Skripal is plainly under duress." And he notes that only Russians allowed us to hear the actual voice of Yulia Skripal in the recording of the phone call to her cousin. The Brits didn't release that. And in that phone call, she suggested that British authorities were, the information she gave contradicted what Murray characterizes as, quote, British authorities were still telling lies that Sergei, the father, was in a coma and Yulia herself still in serious condition. And Murray writes, "It strikes me as inherently improbable that when Yulia called her cousin as her first act the very moment she was able, that she would then issue a formal statement through Scotland Yard forbidding her cousin to be in touch or to visit." So Murray publishes the statement from Scotland Yard. I'll read some excerpts. Quote, "I have left my father in the care of the Salisbury District Hospital. He is still seriously ill. I, too, am still suffering with the effects of the nerve agent used against us." Quote, "I have specially trained officers available to me who are helping to take care of me and to explain the investigative processes that are being undertaken. I have access to friends and family. I've been made aware of my specific contacts at the Russian embassy who have kindly offered me their assistance in any way they can. At the moment, I do not wish to avail myself of their services, but if I change my mind, I know how to contact them." And get this. Most importantly, this is a statement attributed to Yulia Skripal. "I am safe and feeling better as time goes by, but I am not yet strong enough to give a full interview to the media, as one day I hope to do. Until that time, I want to stress that no one speaks for me or my father but ourselves. I thank my cousin Victoria for her concern, but ask that she does not visit me or try to contact me for the time being. Her opinions and assertions are not mine, and they are not my father's." Now, this really sounds off-key. And she closes by saying, "For the moment, I do not wish to speak to the press or the media and ask for their understanding and patience whilst I try to come to terms with my current situation." Now, Craig Murray notes the phrasing here that despite the fact that she lived part of her child in Britain and speaks good English, that the statement is written in the type of format official English, the type of formal official English of a high level, which only comes from a certain kind of native speaker. So he quotes the line, "At the moment, I do not wish to avail myself of their services." And then he says, "Wrote no native Russian speaker, comma, ever." And he closes his post thusly, "Yulia is, of course, in protective custody for her own safety. At the very best, she's being psychologically force-fed the story about the evil Russian government attempting to poison her with the doorknob. And she's being kept totally isolated from any influence that may reinforce any doubts she has as to that story. Yulia Skripal is being kept incommunicado and under duress," asserts Craig Murray. And the Russians echo this. They say, "Particularly amazing is the phrase, 'no one speaks for me,' appearing in a statement which, instead of being read on camera by Yulia herself, is published at the Scotland Yard website." And the Russian statement concluded, "The document only strengthens suspicions that we are dealing with a forcible isolation of the Russian citizen." Well, we now have the tally. Mark Zuckerberg survived 2 days, 10 hours, 600 questions, lobbed at him by members of Congress. And he did a great job of ducking the vast majority of them. Senator, I'll have my team get back to you on that. He didn't really confirm any of the allegations that were put forward in some of the questions about the massive amount of data that Facebook collects, some 29,000 data points on the average Facebook user. And a data point is a like, or, you search for an airline ticket, or you looked at a cat video, all that stuff. But Zuckerberg's talking points had prepared him for the question, should he step down? He was prepared for it. He was going to say no, but nobody asked him that. I am not aware that anybody asked him to break up Facebook, Instagram, WhatsApp, and the other services that Facebook owns. And while he agreed to explore regulation and some sort of codified law about our private data, he really didn't commit to anything. And part of that is because I believe that there was a fundamental failure by the members of Congress to define what they meant by personal data. And he was able to work around that by saying, well, we got your phone number and your name and your birthday, but that's all public information. Well, Brian X. Chen is a tech reporter for the New York Times. So he got his Facebook file. And by the way, I've received mine, but I haven't had time to really go through it. I just saw a bunch of recent posts and I kind of yawned. But he said the critical thing is to look for the file that is called index. It's essentially a raw data set of your Facebook account. In it, Brian Chen found out that 500 advertisers, including Bad Dad, a motorcycle parts store, and Space Jesus, an electronica band, had his contact information. He also said that it was really creepy that when he loaded Facebook Messenger, it copied everything out of his iPhone contacts. And I saw that too, and it troubled me. I resisted putting Messenger on my phone, and then I just finally relented. But he said Facebook kept the entire list of his contacts, including the phone number for his car mechanic and his apartment door buzzer. Now, that's pretty intrusive. He also notes that Facebook logs the locations that you post from. Now, I always decline to state my location. But Facebook knows from the IP addresses, and part of it is to protect you from somebody logging into your account from an unknown location. But it cuts both ways. And Chen also notes that Facebook uses tracking technologies like web cookies and invisible pixels that load in your web browser to collect information about your browsing activities, and that's not related to what you're doing on Facebook. And I concede that I leave a browser with Facebook open on my desktop at all times. And that means Facebook knows all of my other browsing, which news sites I went to collect data today, and, if I look at porn, they know I look at porn. So one of the points that Zuckerberg made that I thought was compelling was the distinction between the data that they collect, which is primarily to facilitate targeting by advertisers, and the information that is collected by Internet service providers. So just this morning, I got an email from Comcast, and I don't have any campaigns that I'm working on right now, but I do from time to time work as a media advisor on political campaigns. So they were pitching me about all the big data that they've got. Quote, elections are influenced by the access, understanding, and application of big data, psychographic profiling, and targeted content. Yes, that's what Cambridge Analytica does. But Comcast is offering to sell me their big data, and we know that they control the pipes, and they actually have more data on where you've been on the Internet and what you've done on the Internet than Facebook does. At least I think so. The next bullet point here reads, big data will get even bigger and more fine-tuned as candidates use data science to analyze greater amounts of information, producing more accurate results. The use of more data will enable candidates to geo-target voters in a more effective manner. So, one more. Media buying has shifted from campaigns purchasing networks and dayparts to buying audiences. TV, and especially digital, can offer aggregate household and user profile information that predicts the likelihood of a behavior. My point is that every tech company that has the ability to collect your data does, and they exploit it commercially. And if you allow them, they sell it to other data collectors. And I'm not optimistic that we're going to get a handle on this in a regulatory framework, but we sure should. Thanks for listening to this daily news and comment podcast. We give it away free. You're free to share it. It's on YouTube. Click on the subscribe button when you go there.
Happy trails to you until we meet again. Happy trails to you. Keep smiling.